Welcome back to Don't Repeat What Mommy Says.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Today, let's talk about working life and childcare.
Okay. You have something to say about it, or you want me to start?
I think you should probably start because I haven't worked for very much time since I've had kids.
Well, I know I used to tell you guys when you have kids, it's very difficult to work full time. Because I know everybody's like, women can do everything. Like, you can climb the corporate ladder and raise children, but you can't do. Okay, just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. But I don't believe you can do both and do both well. You can do both, but what's suffering, your job or your kids?
Yeah, so that was something I've seen people argue it the other way.
Hmm.
Personally, I feel like there is always time you are never too old to start a new career. You are never too old to go back to school. You, however, will get to a point where you are too old to have children.
Yes.
So, in my opinion, I would rather have my kids, younger and raise my kids and then worry about the rest of it. I know some people do it the other way. Some people go to school, they get their career, and then they try to have kids. That seems to be more the norm these
It
days.
is. It is. And I
Um,
mean, I think it's fine if you can make that work, but they do call them childbearing years for a reason.
yeah, so I think my advice to anyone who might be watching this, I wouldn't wait for the right time to have a kid because
There
I
is
don't
no
think
right
there is
time.
one. No, there's certainly not. Um, and from my personal experience, we started trying to have our first child when I was 21. I didn't have him until I was 25. So you might have something unexpected come up. So if we had started when I was 30 and it took me until I was 35, I might
That's
not
a,
have had any more children.
well, and it would have been a geriatric pregnancy,
Right.
which comes with its own challenges. Not that there's anything wrong with having a geriatric pregnancy, which I hate that term for somebody who's 35 because you're certainly not geriatric. And then there are some conditions like PCOS and stuff where they tend to get pregnant later in life. Like they had infertility issues and then later in life they don't.
Yeah, with PCOS, what they found was around the age of about 30. And there are other factors that can come into play that prevent ovulation, but they've found that a lot of times women with PCOS hit about 30 and their body goes into a state where they hyperovulate. So people with PCOS tend to get pregnant spontaneously later in life. But when that happens, you're also at a significantly higher risk for twins because you're hyperovulating, which means you're ovulating more than one egg or more than once in a cycle, which can, a twin pregnancy is inherently considered a high risk pregnancy. So,
It is. I mean, and like again, we're not pooping on people who choose those routes. And in this day and age, with the way the economy is and the price of everything, you almost have to have two incomes. And we did. We needed. I did not have the luxury of being able to be a full-time stay-at-home mother. I would have if I could have, but I couldn't because we have bills to pay. So I did take a lot of jobs that were very flexible because my primary focus was my children. That was what was most important to me. So when I went to work, and I did work full time for a while because I needed to. So I worked nights and my husband worked days. That was difficult because we didn't see each other, but it was really important to us for us to be the ones raising our children and not have daycare raising our kids or a babysitter or even grandparents or whatever. I just feel like I wanted to screw my kids up in my own special way, not deal with however somebody else was going to screw them up, or which I make a joke. But it's not terrible if you have to put your kid in daycare or whatever. I'm not saying you're a bad mom. You're not. We all do what we need to do, but
um,
there are options.
yeah, definitely not terrible if you have to put your kids in daycare. So for us, the original plan, I had a job that was work from home. I ended up getting laid off. The whole can of worms we're not going to get into. But So I only actually worked for 1 month after Henry was born. I had a 3 month maternity leave because it was work from home and it was pretty, like I wasn't on my feet, I wasn't doing anything strenuous. It was pretty much on my time, on my pace. I literally worked until my water broke and I went to the hospital. And then I took a 3 month maternity leave, came back, worked for a month, and then got laid off. And even in just that 1 month, my kid was only 3 months. It was like the 3 to 4 month age. So he wasn't very mobile. He wasn't doing very much. He still needed things. But even just in that short period of time, I can't imagine. Like some of the moms who work from home and raise their kids at the same time, like hats off to you because that was difficult. And all I had was a little 3 month old who was still a potato. I can't even imagine trying to do that with Henry at the age he's at now.
Yeah, I mean it was difficult when I had to work, but especially when I worked full time. So I worked nights because my husband had more earning potential than I did at the time, which has flipped now. And so that's another thing too. Like your kids do grow up and life does change, and you can. Now there are some careers. I was in sales and marketing before I had children, and that was not a possibility after having children and being out of that market for as long as I was. The entire market changed. So yes, I lost that career. I could have gotten back into it, I'm sure, but it's completely different now. So yes, I did lose that, and that was okay with me because in my world, raising my children was more important than any job. But then I'm not extremely career focused. So I'm not crapping on somebody who is because, but the thing I worry about if you go to school, get your career, and this is your dream career, and you're in your 30s and you have a child, what if the career thing doesn't work out because it's too much to do both? And now it's like, I don't know. It's not a great, there's not perfect options with this.
Yeah, I think it's really kind of sucks, honestly. Like
It
the
does.
plight of women when it comes to working, especially if you are somebody who's very career oriented. Um, and I think that's something to point out too. So we did a whole episode a while ago about stay-at-home moms, and stay-at-home moms do a lot. Um, and so from my perspective, I've only ever experienced being a stay-at-home mom. And when I was working, I was working from home and taking care of my kids at the same time. And I wasn't doing that 100% by myself all the time. I had projects that I had to work on where I had to have total focus, and I would go over to your house. I would have grandma and grandpa watch Henry so I could do things. So it's not easy to be a stay at home mom. It's not easy to be a stay at home mom who's also working a work from home job. Um, but what was your experience being a mom who was working outside the home?
Well, there's a lot of concern because even though my husband and I didn't have, one of us was almost always home, but there was still like an hour or two that we did have to have somebody take care of the children. There was always the worry, like, did I pick a good person to watch my child? And then when I worked full time, when I was working nights, I mean, I put in a long day. I didn't get very much sleep before I had to get up with the kids. I did it. I don't know how. I really don't. But I wasn't getting very much sleep. And it was taxing. And I still did most of the domestic stuff too, which I know is a lot of things that people complain. And before you think my husband's a jerk or whatever, he worked a lot of hours. Like I was working full time, he was working full time and a half or more. So he didn't really have the time to get all that done. And also his standard of clean is way different than mine.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so I was still doing all of that. So that was difficult. So then I went down to work, like I was waitressing because I could make pretty good money in a lot shorter amount of time, and I could be a lot more flexible. So like if something came up, I could have somebody fill in for me if I needed to. Not always, but usually, I could I could just work my schedule around things. That was a little easier, but it was still, it was difficult, but I think moms by and large just get it done. Like whatever it is that you need to do, you can get it done, but it's difficult to juggle it all. And my husband
So,
and I literally hardly had a relationship because we didn't see each other.
well, and that's one of the things we had kind of decided we were going to prioritize when I got pregnant. Um, we had talked about whether or not I would continue working. I told him, as long as it's the work from home job, I was making my own hours. It wasn't too busy. I was like, yeah, I'll keep my job. After I lost my job, I looked for a new one for a while. But we kind of agreed. I didn't want to work outside the home because I didn't want somebody else raising our kids. And even working from home, like I still had to have childcare some of the time, but it was childcare like while I was there. Um,
And it was family.
and it was family, which I know family is not an option for everyone.
Right.
And just because they're family doesn't mean they're safe.
Well,
The
no, that's
reason
true.
the reason I wasn't concerned, one, I was there with them. Two, like these are family members who, like my grandparents, they watched me when I was a kid. Like I would trust them with my own kids because they raised me and they were fine. Well, they didn't raise me, but they watched me in those formative years and I was okay. So,
Well, and then I think we need to stress that to the people watching this too. The reason that I was so hell bent about not having daycare or very few people I would watch my kids is because I did have a couple of people in my life whose children were pretty severely abused in a child care situation. So I have a lot of trepidation. I don't want to crap on daycare though, because there's a lot of good daycare workers. There's a lot of good daycares, but it
well,
just scared me.
and Aaliyah went to a fantastic
She did.
daycare. So,
She
I
did.
mean,
And Paige needed a break. So that's why she took her to Tammy. And Tammy was fantastic.
yeah, so, and I'm not even pooping because I saw somebody complaining about that because this woman was a stay-at-home mom and she enrolled her kids in daycare for like 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, sometimes you need a break because I've told my husband that before. Like, I'm jealous that he has a 50-minute commute to work, 50 um, minute commute to work because he gets almost 2 full hours a day with nobody bothering him. Because he complained about it. He's like, I'm working 12-hour days. I'm commuting almost an hour both ways. I'm like, I wish I had a commute.
Yeah,
So,
I like my commute. I commute like 45 minutes now, and I like it. I
well,
listen to my music, and nobody bothers me.
I actually used to enjoy it when I had kind of a long commute too. So when Andy first joined the military, I was working at a nursing home, and we moved to rent out a house that his family had that was about an hour away from where I worked. And I loved the commute. I didn't love it as much when I was like working myself half to death, but I was also super bored, so I was taking a bunch of extra shifts and then commuting an hour both ways. So they were long days, but I
I
mean, I
think
don't know.
whatever
I'm
you
jealous.
choose, you can get it done. Just know that whichever way you choose is hard. Uh, it really is. I mean, it's like
Well,
every time you have a child, there is 10 years that women in particular, which I know it's not fair, but it is what it is, and we really wouldn't have it any other way,
right.
where you're really most of your focus is on that child. And so it's difficult to be at work because there's the mom guilt, for not being there. But it's difficult to be at home too because then there's the I need to get out of this damn house and I really don't want to see these kids anymore. And then you feel guilty because you like don't want to be with your kids anymore because you're sick of them. So any way you slice it, but just
Well,
if you can and you don't have an oopsie baby, which I am not crapping on oopsie babies because Lauren was an oopsie baby. Um, we wanted a baby, but we
just
really
not
didn't
that
want a
soon.
baby that soon. Like,
Right.
oh my God, so, but these are things to think about. Like, what are your priorities? What is there some plan that you guys can come to some kind of agreement with, which probably won't be met perfectly, but at least have some kind of plan of attack? Like, is your career that important to you? And if it is, maybe start looking for that daycare before that baby comes so you have somebody that you trust.
Well, and daycare costs are outrageous in this
They
country.
are.
Unfortunately, there are some other programs that are not daycares that you can utilize when your kid's a little bit older, like Head Start programs are often free or very discounted depending on where you live. Sorry, didn't want to cough into the microphone. Um, so, like, there are some options as your kids get a little bit older. But one thing I've heard a lot on social media from people who work around like new parents a lot, they're always saying don't rely on family for babysitting. Because there's been a lot of people lately who've thought, well, my mom said she'd help me with the kids so I can go back to work. And then, the time rolls around and grandma decides she doesn't want to go back to watching little sticky people 24/7 or whatever. Not 24/7, obviously, but so there's a lot to think about. I would hope your family wouldn't be poopy enough to go back on their word if they said they would do it, but that is
Well,
a
and I
thing that's
know,
happening.
yeah, why though? I don't understand that. I
I
don't know.
I
I
don't
mean, I
know.
take my grandkids whenever, if I
Yeah.
can. I mean, I have to go to work, so there's that. But I do know a lady who retired so that she could watch her grandchild.
Well, and I've had days where like I've texted you saying, "Hey, can you watch Henry for however long?" and you didn't get back to me, so I just started driving over. I figured I'd
Yeah,
either drop him off or bring him with me, but usually you take him.
I do. I mean, because I know it's hard, and I mean, I was in that position before, and unfortunately back then I didn't. I mean, it's not that my parents didn't help me; they did. But my mother had a very high powered job at the time, and so she had to go to work. So she was working a lot, and then my dad has a lot of disabilities, so he couldn't just drop everything. Although he was pretty good about going to your guys' school functions and stuff like that, so he was there. Uh, so I didn't get a lot of help because they didn't have the time to do it, but they did come over and watch you guys so that dad and I could go out and you know connect since we hardly saw each other.
And that's another thing, getting childcare to make time for yourself and to make time as a couple, because you're still married to that person. And I know we've been harping on marriage a lot, but here we go again. Um, so, a daycare is typically that it's daytime care. I know there are some that do weird hours, especially like I have a friend who works in a hospital and they have like the daycare through the hospital that has weird hours. Um, but like, what are you going to do about that? Where do you find childcare? And if you don't have friends, who do you look for? Or family or whoever that you trust?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. Like I said, these are good things to think about before you have a baby, so that you have some kind of plan in mind. Yeah, the career thing, yeah, I gave all that up. So, and I don't regret it, but I know some people will. And we knew a couple actually. The husband was a little bit older, quite. I really don't know how much older he was than her, but he was older and able to take early retirement, I believe is what he did. He had like a, I don't know, super good paying job like engineer or something like that. And so he was able to take a pension. Well, his wife, she was very career minded and she was climbing the ladder, the corporate ladder, and she was all about it. And when they discussed having children, she was like, there is no way I am giving up my career. Like, I am a rising star and this is what I'm doing. He took an early pension and he decided to be a stay at home dad so that she could continue on with their career. And they had two children, and it worked fantastically for those two. And he was an amazing house husband.
And I mean, if that works for you, that is amazing because like it somebody's got to do it when you have kids. Somebody has to be the primary caregiver. And I mean, obviously, you and dad split it a good bit because you
We
guys
did.
took shifts, who was home, who was at work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think a lot of times it falls on women, and we have a hard time separating ourselves. And even if you end up, with a house husband like she did, you still have to take time off sometimes when you're pregnant, when you give birth, when you're recovering, and grand scheme you might take. I think in the US you can legally take like 3 months and they have to hold your job for you. Um, so even if you take that 3 months, grand scheme, it doesn't seem that long, but that can be a huge hit to your career. I know the company I worked for was a tech company, and tech evolves very quickly. By the time I came back after 3 months, I had to essentially learn how to do everything again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's rough, but you can do it. You're probably
And
already doing it if you're watching this.
probably, um, but let's talk daycares because I see the daycare woes all the time.
Yeah.
So, what there are obvious red flags, but what would be something you would think if you were looking at a daycare? What would be something you'd be like, hell no?
If I wasn't able to drop in unannounced, that would be a hell no for me.
Yeah, I've seen that, and so a woman I know, her daughter's in daycare. They've been having all kinds of daycare struggles. This is the second one they've been to. They won't let her send a straw cup. So, like, instead of a sippy cup, they have like the weighted straw cups. It has to be a sippy cup, and their argument was sippy cups are better for kids, which is not true. So she's been fighting back and forth with this daycare about all these little stupid things. And I'm like, at what point is it too much and you want to pick a different daycare? Or do you just say, screw it, this daycare's fine. Like, my kid is flourishing here. I can get past the little things.
Well, and that's the thing though, because we've seen too, like moms getting upset because the daycare is not taking care of their child the way they take care of their child. The daycare is never going to take care of your child the way that you take care of your child. So you have to be okay with that. Would I be okay with that? Probably not. That's probably why I didn't do it.
Well, and I think there's something to be said too. Like, daycares have their policies, they have their things they have to follow.
Well, they have more
So,
than one kid or more than two kids. They have a whole bunch of kids.
right, depending what their staff to kid ratio is, and that's going to differ by state. Um, I believe the state she's in, it's like a 1 to 5 or something. But so you have, one person responsible for all these kids. They have to have a system in place that's going to work to keep order.
And, I mean, I just think it's important that you need to get to know the person and ask a lot of questions beforehand. Because, like I said, so we had mostly family or people that we knew pretty well that watched the kids, and it was only an hour or two between when I went to work and my husband got home. So, not a huge chunk of the day. When Paige was a baby, I had a couple of like in-home daycare people, and the one, my daughter, all of a sudden, and she was very young, so didn't want to go to the babysitter's house, was very upset, a lot of anxiety, and I didn't understand because the lady was super nice. I talked to her a lot, whatever. Every day I dropped her off. And it turned out I was there talking to her about my concerns, and while talking to her about my concerns, her daughter, who was a little bit older than my daughter, who apparently was a little bit jealous of the attention that her mother was, like assaulted Paige.
Oh no.
Yeah, and apparently that was why Paige was not liking going to the daycare. So I told the lady, and I felt terrible about it. I'm like, I think we have a situation here where your daughter is really jealous, and at this time, I think I'm going to have to fire you because you can't possibly watch them 24/7. I'm aware of that. I would assume that this kind of like she would run her big wheel into her or shit like that. I would assume she was doing it like when her mom was making meals for them or something.
Right.
Totally not the lady's fault, and like no shade to her, but
Well, and I think, God forbid something does happen at a daycare. Um, you can't know everything. So I would hope you would not blame yourself for that. You did the best you could with the information you had. But what I will say about that, if somebody is watching your child and they start behaving differently, or you have some sort of a gut feeling that something's not right, like, listen to that. You have instincts for a reason. And I
yeah.
think especially when it comes to pregnancy, birth, and child rearing. Our instincts are incredibly strong. So listen to them. They're telling you important things.
Yeah, and again, it's not like the daycare lady I have was a bad lady. She just had a jealous daughter, and the kid was like, I don't know, 3 or something like that. So
Couldn't have been that old.
it was not, it wasn't like end of days situation, but it was like not going to be good for her daughter or my daughter at that time. So the lady was like, oh my gosh, maybe I need to not take smaller children for a while until my daughter, we can get her past this jealousy thing. But she didn't know. So yeah, I mean, if you have an instinct, that's something that's worth a chat.
Yeah. And I mean, beyond that, at some point, your kids will get to a point where they will not be with you constantly. Whether you did daycare or not, there will come a time where your kids have to be somewhere without you there. And so, like for stay at home moms, a lot of times that's when they go off to school. Unless you homeschool, different story. Um, and there's going to be things you can't control. And part of that is the dynamic. Again, there's more kids than there are supervising adults. There's also, other kids. I mean, kids fight. It happens. Just yesterday, Henry tried to kick Ava for nothing. But they're kids. It's what they do. So,
Yeah, I mean, what are we? We're talking about working moms.
yeah.
Yeah, I just find something that works for you and give yourself a little bit of grace too, because it's hard. It's really hard, and just the being tired and the mother guilt and all of that, especially if you have a job that's not too terribly flexible and you end up having to miss one of your child's, things like a concert at school or something like that. That sucks. And that didn't happen. I don't think I missed any of your guys' stuff because by the time you guys were both in school, well, I worked nights, so I had my days available anyway when I was full time, and then I waitressed. And like I said, what did I work, 3 or 4 days a week?
Something like that.
Yeah, and I was always able to work it around like my kids' schedule. But if you don't have that luxury and you end up missing something, your child is not going to be scarred for life because you didn't go to the spring sing or whatever. But you're going to feel that guilt. I mean, you're just going to. It's
Well,
horrible. I was at work when Paige had to go to the emergency room one of the times.
well, and there was somebody brought it up as a daycare worker themselves. And they said, if I see a kid reach a milestone for the first time, I won't tell the parent. I want the parent to think that they are witnessing this the very first time. But the reality is, if your kid's not with you all the time, there might be things you miss. Your kid's not going to be scarred for life over it. It's going to be okay.
Oh, for sure.
So,
Yeah, you do the best you can. I mean, and just be easy on yourself. Look for those signs in your children if you see like a major behavioral change and try to get to the bottom of those things. Most of the time it's not anything like they're being abused at daycare. It could just be like, you know,
another kid's a butthole.
another kid's a butthole, a little separation anxiety. One good thing to do though, if you have to be away from your children because you have to go to work or you want to go to work either way, carve out that special time for just you and your child.
Yeah.
Whether it's, going to the park for an hour a week or whatever it is, sitting at the table and doing a craft or whatever your thing is, just make sure you have that because that's the kind of stuff your kids are going to remember. Like, oh,
Yeah.
mom, remember when we made those ornaments that we didn't finish and we left them for you? Maybe that.
Remember the one sequin on the Santa head
Yeah.
and the shoe?
The stupid boot that was supposed to be pink, but it had one silver sequin. We all remember that. Good times.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think
And
that,
if you're an at-home mom, like you said with Aaliyah going to Miss Tammy, I mean, that was beautiful. And Paige didn't have to. I was home.
Yeah, I think even if you're an at-home mom, it's okay.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
not only is it okay, I think you should think about childcare because at some point you're going to want some time away from your child. And I totally get the moms who don't do overnights,
Oh,
but
yeah.
for sure,
Overnights can be scary, yeah.
overnights can be scary. And like
The
Henry right
first the
now,
first overnight is very scary.
well, and we did an overnight with Henry when he was a bit younger, but recently when I had Ava, I mean, that was rough on you guys to do overnights because it's not his normal and he's not very
He actually
adaptable to
was
sleeping.
fine until that last day. And that's only
Yeah,
because I was getting ready for the Christmas party.
yeah.
And the cat crept on the bed and Henry hit his eye and
And then drew on a chair.
threw on a chair.
Yeah.
That
So,
was a bad day.
childcare, important to think about. Working moms, you're doing hard shit.
You are doing her. Oh, with the working moms, definitely communicate with your spouse about division of labor at home.
Oh, for sure.
Because they're not, I know, I keep seeing it. I shouldn't have to tell him what needs to get done. I shouldn't, and I won't tell
Right,
him what I need. He should know this. He doesn't. He doesn't
right.
know.
He
He
doesn't
doesn't.
know.
He doesn't know, and even if he does know, he's not sure if you want him to do it.
And if he, like,
He's not sure. I work with men. I've heard this from many men. I
you talked
really
about
have.
giving dad the silent treatment and he thought it was the best week of your
Yes.
marriage. When
Yes,
you're
he
not
thought.
telling him to do anything, he's expecting you don't want anything done. Men are
Right.
very, they're kind of black and white when it
They
comes to
really
things like that. Not
are.
with everything, but when it comes to division of labor, men tend to be better when you go, okay, this, and this needs to be done. Pick a task. And it's not fair to have to be the one to make the executive decision of who's doing what, but it happens. And if, like I said, if you don't say anything, he's just going to assume, well, I don't have to do it. Shouldn't say anything.
Right. And here's the thing. It might work better for you guys to just have a list of crap that needs to get done for the week and everybody picks their poison. And it might work better for you to have specific tasks that are assigned to that person. Uh, my husband and I don't know that we ever had the conversation. It just kind of happened organically for us because at one point I did everything in the home because he was working outside the home way more than I was. So I mean, he picked up after himself and stuff like that, and he did the dishes at night because he was at home with the kids at night when I was at work. So I mean, he did that stuff. That was just kind of a given. Like the kitchen's a mess, you need to clean the kitchen. He knew that was an expectation, but because he doesn't like getting yelled at, and he doesn't like it when I slam shit around because then he has to fix hinges. So he was just like, yeah, you know. So there was that, but then like roles have reversed somewhat for us now,
Mm,
and he has a little more time at home than I do. I do get a week off at a time, but I am so tired by then that I have other stuff that I'd rather be doing. So he has kind of taken over a lot of stuff. Now there's some stuff he's never going to take, like he is not going to clean a toilet because the man thinks they're self-cleaning because they flush. I'm not going to convince him otherwise, and ew.
yeah,
So that's probably never going to happen. So I'm not even going to ask because, again, his version of clean and mine are two different things, and it's a toilet. Ew. So there's that. But I mean, like he started vacuuming. He does these things that he kind of took on. But when we first like stopped working the separate shifts or whatever, it's just like it worked for us for him to have his stuff that he does, and then I have my stuff that I do, and I do not do his thing.
yeah,
Whatever his thing is, figure out how to get that done, my friend, because I'm not doing it. You know,
yeah,
so you need to
absolutely. I
stop
know.
doing that, ladies. Ladies, stop doing that. Because when you do that, you just train them to know, like, if I leave it long enough, she'll do it. Don't
Yep.
let them get away with that. Uh-uh. No. Bad.
All right. On that note, should we wrap it?
I guess, sure.
All right. Well, if you're out there, working hard, you know, you're doing a good job. And I don't know, send it to a friend who needs to see something like this, who needs to hear not to do their husband's chores, all right?
Don't do your husband's chores and
Yeah,
work on, my ladies.
work on.